Good evening everyone, and welcome to number 6 in a series of talks about the history of English detective fiction from 1920 to about 1960. Now, as I've said before, this is not a strict chronology, nor is it an A to Z. Rather, it is a series of themes that I hope will interest the enthusiasts for the genre, or who knows, we may even pick up one or two new readers. This evening, for the 6th talk, I would like to chat about murder and the English village. In her 1955 novel, Scales of Justice, Naomi Marsh requires Nurse Keppel to stand with her bicycle on a hillside overlooking a quilt of English countryside. She imagines that she's painting a map, and so she peoples the scene with caricatures of the people that we're going to meet in her story. Now, what Naomi Marsh has done by opening her book in this way is, of course, she's appealed to our sentimentality. She has indicated what sort of book we should expect. Nowadays, we would say that we're in for a cosy mystery. And she has also introduced us to her basket of suspects. Now, this shows that Murder in an English Village was a very useful plot device for writers of the Golden Age. Without forensic science, it was necessary to reduce and contain the number of suspects that the detective had to investigate, be it on a snowbound Cali coach, or a isolated island, or a country house. Now, initially, when the detective story got going, the country house was very attractive because, unlike an English village, you did not get strangers just wandering in and out of a country house. But it had a problem. As the 20s progressed to the 30s, people began to wonder if these country houses and their families were really worth protecting. They felt uncomfortable with the deferential approach. And when they looked at the people inside the country houses, many people with a broadening social conscience began to think that where immorality, and that meant wrongdoing, was concerned, then people in country houses were very likely suspect. But when we turn to the English village as a scene for murder, of course there is no such unease. In fact, during the 1930s, with the growth of suburbia and large towns, the English village became an aspiration for many of the detective fiction readers. Even for those people who could never expect to live in an English village, motoring holidays, hiking holidays, cycling holidays, and the fashion for back-to-nature groups showed just how aspirational this English country life was. And more especially, not only was it worth hoping for, it was worth defending. It was worth fighting for. You may want to listen to the words of the 1939 song They'll Always Be in England. It nicely confirms the point. So books about murders in an English village not only found an aspirational audience, not only were they acceptable to the social conscience of the time, but they politically found their niche as well. But it was during the post-war period, particularly in the 1950s, that English detective fiction and murder in an English village really began to take off as far as sales were concerned. And of course, by this time, the picture has changed its value. It stopped being aspirational and has started being nostalgic. Even people who grew up in English villages during the 1950s, as I did myself, recognised that St Mary Mead no longer exists. Villages are not like that anymore. Indeed, Agatha Christie makes this point very well in the opening chapters of her novel A Murder is Announced, when character after character bemoan the fact that villages in England have changed. And so they developed a nostalgic focus. And what's good about nostalgia is in the 1960s and 1970s it made good television. But that lies out of our time frame that we're talking about here. Now, one underlying strength of the murder stories set in an English village is that they can never be disproved. Like the P.G. Wodehouse novels of Jeeves and Wooster, that England never existed so it cannot be found guilty. Now, as much as I love these English village murders, they do have a downside. Colin Watson used the term mayhem parva to describe the village, and he invited us to people it with stereotypes. So we would need the rector, we would need the doctor, the policeman, the publican, the poacher, the wealthy industrialist, the gossiping widows, and of course introducing those stereotypes is a shorthand that a lazy writer can use, and they can then finesse the trick by getting those characters to work against the stereotype. This is not the best in English detective fiction. I suppose the natural development of murder in English villages came with Colin Watson's The Flaxborough Chronicles. He started the series in the late 50s with the comic mystery Coffin Scarcely Used, and went on to produce some fine examples of detective writing. In those cases, the rural murders took place not in an English village, but in a traditional English market town. How quaint. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malcolm Noble. Thank you for listening to this talk about the history of English detective fiction from 1920 to about 1960. Once again, I need to thank Freeze Effects for the royalty-free music. You will find a list of all these talks and the appropriate link on my website, malcolmnoble.com. I hope you'll pay a visit to it. And can I remind you about my YouTube series, Malcolm Noble Talks About Crime Fiction Classics. I've posted this talk on the 1st of January, and the next one will be on the internet from the 14th. Please don't forget to like, follow or comment, and I hope that I'll see you next time. Good night, and God bless.